What a beautiful day to see that we're in the house of Yahweh after a gorgeous rain last night, even though it was, praise God, it was nothing tremendous as far as damage or anything, and it was quite a lightning show. And we know that that's good because lightning energizes the earth and washes all the impurities out of the atmosphere, and God knows we need that here because all the things that we're human beings are consuming in this area, putting in the air, atmosphere. It's a wonder we're all still can breathe. We praise God for His tender mercies and His grace. So we're going to begin with talking about this week's Torah portion a little bit, Metzora. And as we move to the next one, it says, as the average Bible reader dutifully slogs through the laws. Is that what we've been doing? Is slogging through these laws? Some of us are, been here for quite a while and been round and round and round on these Torah portions. And when you get to Leviticus, it's always kind of tough, although it's got some really good information, good things, a lot of things that point to our day and beyond. But as we, through these laws concerning biblical leprosy, you might wonder what this has to do with us and why the Torah spends so much time on the details of this disease. Unless you are a son of Aaron, serving in the Levitical priesthood, the laws of diagnosing and purifying lepers don't have much application. Okay? The average person will never be responsible for distinguishing between one type of rash and another for purposes of declaring someone ritually unfit. And going like, whew, thanks, right? What a responsibility to have. So, but nevertheless, the laws of biblical leprosy have spiritual applications. So that's the part that we're kind of interested in today. Traditionally, the rabbis have used these laws to teach about the grievous sin of evil speech, Lashon Hara. Okay? What is it? This is taken from one of their writings, one of the rabbinical writings. It says, what is it that makes a leper so unique that the Torah says in Leviticus 13:46, he shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. His gossiping separated a husband from his wife and a man from his neighbor. Therefore, said the Torah, said, he shall live alone. So, never really thought about this in any depth. We've always talked about, that the leper had to be outside of the camp and these types of things. And sometimes we even think, well, maybe it's because that you could catch leprosy, that it was contagious or something of that nature. And in a sense, yes, it can be contagious, particularly if we look at the spiritual side of it, look at the idea that that from evil speech. And we know that that can be contagious, right? When somebody starts talking and you join in, pretty soon you got that leprosy all over you too. So we're going to look at some of that, but not altogether. That's not the only reason or what leprosy is. That is just one aspect of it, or can be. So the idea of having to live alone, that was the very thing that the Creator said when he created Adam. He said, it is not good for him to be alone. So he gave him a helpmate. So if we've, through our own trespasses, if we've removed ourselves from the congregation, then we're living alone, which is not good. All right, the association between evil speech and leprosy is derived from the story of Miriam's leprosy in Numbers 12. Miriam was punished with leprosy for grumbling against her brother Moses. I know that you've all read the story. The sages inferred from this that biblical leprosy was a punishment for the sin of evil tongue. Given that piece of information, the laws of the leper, Metzora, became fertile ground for homilic teachings about the sin of evil speech. The rabbis gave moral interpretations for the Torah's regulations for assessing leprosy and the laws for effecting purification. Okay, so from that, they got the idea that leprosy was caused by evil speech, which it can most definitely be. So as we move on, we're going to look at something that's kind of interesting. It says, for example, the sages taught that the word Metzora, leper, is derived from a combination of the Hebrew words matze, which means wellspring or source, and the Hebrew word ra, which means evil. Put them together, and it spells the word leper, Metzora. But not really. Sort of, very close. It's not a real etymology of the word. The word Metzora actually comes from the Hebrew word for leprosy. The wellspring of evil explanation is meant as an illustrative reminder. So we couldn't just say, well, we break this word down like we do in Hebrew. This means this, and when we put it together, it means wellspring of evil. So, but it was a illustrative method to illustrate the cause of some leprosy. Okay. It says, what is the source from which evil springs? It is the tongue. Therefore, one who speaks evil is a spiritual Metzora, or leper. James, the brother of Yeshua, probably knew this interpretation. He alludes to it in his epistle, where he compares the tongue to a wellspring. And some of y'all that's been coming to Wednesday night, we started in the book of James and went through it and did a pretty good study of it. And we've moved on to 1 John and so forth. Because he quotes here out of James 3, 10 and 11, from the same mouth come both blessings and cursings. My brethren, these things ought not to be done this way. Does a fountain send out from the same opening both fresh and bitter waters? So they made this connection of wellspring here where he says fountain, the wellspring of water. So it's an interesting way to look at it, and we can derive much by looking at these things in that light. And as we move into James, going to read a little bit of James here. I know that all of you probably read it, but it's just a good reminder to come back over some of these things. James 1:1 says, Jacob, that is the Hebrew name for James, is Jacob, a servant of Yahweh and of the Master Yeshua, the Messiah, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greetings. It's interesting as you look at some of these smaller writings in the New Testament in particular, if we sometimes don't pay attention to the very first verse. Who is this epistle written to? Why was it written? His writing was to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. So we could extrapolate from that he's also talking to us, right? Because we know that the 12 tribes have not totally been gathered back together. We know that the 10 tribes were scattered into all the world, and that they're in the process of being brought back together. That's what this whole movement of Hebrew roots is about. So just pay attention when you read these things, and then you understand that's some of the things that we missed in our Christian background, is reading these things in context of who that they were talking about and at what particular time were they saying these things. Because when you read in John, 1 John, it's the same thing. He says, to those that are scattered in these different places. So we begin to understand then that he's talking to us. James 1:18 says, of his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. He begat us what? By a bloodline? Says, with the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. For the wrath of man works not the righteousness of Yahweh. Wherefore, put away all filthiness, abundance of evil, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls. Engrafted, I love that word. Engrafted word. Something that we have taken in and become part of something bigger than ourselves. It says, but be ye doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. So it's a call to action. You know, as we know that speaking in James and so forth, he goes on and talks about faith without works is dead. So faith is an action word. It's a verb. It shows that we must do something. We not just take this in and just sit here like a big fat cat and said, oh man, that was sure good. No, it's to act upon it, to take it, and to proclaim it. You know, that's one of the things that we find in Leviticus 23 when it starts talking about Jehovah's feast days. He says, these days you are to proclaim. Sometimes we just read right over that word and we say, well, you know, we're partaking of it, we're doing it. But he says, proclaim these feasts. That means an action of something you're doing, you're saying, you're telling it, you're relating it to other people that you come in contact with. It says, so proclaim my feast to my people. As we move on further in James 3, it says, for in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. A perfect man. You know, we run up against this quite a bit. The scripture talks about, it says, when God says, be you holy, for I am holy. Be you perfect, for I am perfect. And we, us in our little human brains and minds, says, oh, no, we could never do that. We could never obtain to that. There's no way. Yes, there is. He says, if you offend not in word, the same is a perfect man. Behold, we put bits in the horse's mouth that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships which thought that they would be so great and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, wheresoever the governor wants. Even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindles. You know, I'm sure if you went to Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, they taught you how to start a fire, right? How to, without matches, either with a flint rock or a spinning stick. You'd have to put enough heat. It's all about the heat to start that little bit of kindling. But once you got it started, what happened? Become a roaring fire. Same thing with this. Maybe a real small little thing, but it can grow into a roaring fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature. And it is set on fire of Gehenna, or hell. For every kind of beast and of birds and of serpents and of things in the sea is tamed and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Wow. Well, that's what happened to our parents in the Garden of Eden, right? Those words that Hasatan spoke were deadly poison, but they were taken within, and it spread till it brought about death. Who is a wise man endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good manner of life his works with meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, boast not and lie not against the truth. All comes back to the old heart, doesn't it? Everywhere we look, it's where's your heart? What have you done? This wisdom descends not from above, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish. For where envying strife is, there is confusion in every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Wow. Just think if there was no hypocrisy in our world today. Just that one little thing, how much life would be changed among us. Hypocrisy. Do we say one thing and do something else? That's hypocrisy. That's being a hypocrite. Do we say that we're Torah keepers on Shabbat and then 6 days a week we walk somewhere else? That's hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. And going on in James, do you think that the scripture saith in vain, the spirit that dwells in us lust to envy? But he giveth more grace. Wherefore he says, Elohim resists the proud, but gives grace unto the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to Elohim, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw nigh to Elohim, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be afflicted, and mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of Jehovah, and he will lift you up. Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaks evil of his brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who art thou that judges another? So let us not be judges, but doers of the law. Galatians 6:2, bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of the Messiah. Bear the burdens of another and fulfill the law of the Messiah. Wow. What is that law? Treat your neighbor as yourself is one. For if a man think himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let every man prove his own work, and then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. For every man shall bear his own burden. Let him that is taught in the word communicate unto him that teaches in all good things. Be not deceived, Jehovah is not mocked, for whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. We can see that in our everyday life, can we? In very small things. I'm sure that y'all all have experienced it. Have you experienced road rage? To the extent that you've seen on the news that people crashing into each other and jumping out and trying to kill each other. But you know what would have stopped that? One of them did not react to the other. A soft answer turneth away wrath. De-escalate that problem. How can we de-escalate those problems? Is being humble, bear the burdens of others, love our neighbor as ourselves, even though that neighbor may be talking about you. Galatians 6:8, for he that sows to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that sows to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. We all want life everlasting, right? Most people would go kicking and screaming to death. Just think about life everlasting. Sow to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. As was brought out not too long ago, a couple of Shabbats ago, I think when Rodney was talking about when Bill Cloud was here, and he made a statement. He said, you know, walking in this, about 98% of it is walking it out every day. It's not something new and spectacular and blows your mind every week or day or whatever. It's just walking out what you have learned and walk out that truth. So it says here, it says, do not be weary in well-doing, for in due seasons you shall reap, if you faint not. Because this is not a sprint, but an endurance race. Those that endure to the end will be saved, it says. As many as walk, as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. And as many as walk according to this rule, peace be on them and mercy and upon the Israel of Elohim. It says, especially unto the household of faith. And we think, well, maybe that's just us Torah walkers. That's that household of faith he's talking about. No, it's also our brothers and sisters trying to walk out their faith, whether or not they know the true understanding of everything, but are they trying to work out and walk what they have been taught and know? Deuteronomy 24:8 says, take heed in the plague of leprosy that thou observe diligently, and do according to all that the priest, the Levites, shall teach you. As I commanded them, so you shall observe to do. Remember what Jehovah thy Elohim did unto Miriam by the way after that ye were come forth out of Egypt. When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou didst lend shall bring out the pledge aboard unto you. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. If any case thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment, and bless thee, and it shall be righteousness unto thee before Yahweh thy Elohim. Thou shalt not oppress a hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in the land within your gates. So, speaks to treat all men the same, right? That's why it says in the New Testament, he says there's neither Jew nor Greek. They're all the same. God is no respecter of persons, it said. So we, as his servants, need to be no respecter of persons. Treat all men the way that we would want to be treated. That's what it says, right? Is that the golden rule? It says, all right, we're going to look at leprosy in the Gospels, kind of see what's been going on there. It says the symptoms described in the Torah that might potentially be diagnosed as biblical leprosy involves decomposition. We talked about that, I think, last Shabbat, was that these poor people not only had leprosy, but their fingers and these things would rot off. Their nose would fall off, and so on and so forth. So it involves a decomposition of your body, of your soul, decay and putrefaction, corruption of the flesh. The laws of the sacrifices teach that God's sanctuary shuns death, corruption, and decay. Now, if we looked at these in this sense, God's sanctuary represents immortality and incorruptibility. In his presence there is no death, no decay, and no decomposition. Therefore, he bans from his sanctuary the disease that represents a living decomposition. Leprosy involves an ongoing, visible progression towards physical corruption. It is the antithesis of the immortal and So that's why that they were not allowed to stay in the camp, because you have the presence of the Most High God present there in the sanctuary, dealing with life. Because that was what he told Moses. He says, I'm going to give to you today blessings and curses. Choose life, not death. So when we read and study the sanctuary, then we see the purification of us physically and spiritually. Leprosy also acts as an archetype for all human sickness. Sickness results from the breakdown of the flesh, and death follows. Leprosy graphically represents that progression. Sickness, death, and decay have no place in God's presence. His sanctuary and on earth reflects the heavenly sanctuary. All you got to do is read the book of Hebrews. Very much tells you there's a heavenly sanctuary in operation today with Yeshua as our high priest. Yeshua provides a solution to the leprosy problem. Spiritually, he did not suffer the leprosy-like infection of sin. Physically, his flesh did not suffer corruption. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to undergo decay. So if we're looking at leprosy as a spiritual and even physical, we see that he represented us without such things. Through his resurrection from the dead, his flesh passed from the mortal to the immortal, and from the corruptible to the incorruptible. His resurrected body remains real human flesh, regenerated into an imperishable spiritual body. Therefore, he is the perfect eternal priest, able to serve forever in the incorruptible sanctuary. If you read Hebrews, that's what you find. He says, those priests were many because they died. They had death and they were not live forever, whereas this priest lives forever. Hebrews 7:24, but this man, because he continueth ever, hath an unchangeable priesthood, wherefore he is able also to save them to the uttermost that comes unto Elohim by him, seeing he ever lives to make intercession for us. What a beautiful thought. What a beautiful reality. It's more than thought, it's a reality. It says, perhaps this helps explain why the healing of lepers occupied such a central concern in the ministry of the Master. Not only did he heal many lepers himself, but he gave his 12 disciples authority to heal leprosy as evidence of the kingdom of heaven. Because in reality, he said, I appoint unto you a kingdom. Leprosy symbolizes the sin-laden human condition, destined for death and decay. Each time the Master healed a leper, it represented a reversal of that corrupted mortal state. Every leper healed of his afflictions was a testimony that the kingdom of heaven was at hand. In Romans 7:24, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? Only through Yeshua. So we see all the days of purification, the offerings are because of the blood, representing the death and resurrection into new life. The washing by water in Hebrew is kabas. Strong's 35:26. It's kaf bake mem. The offering of a lamb in the Hebrew is kabes. Kaf bet shin. You see, they are from the same root word with connecting meanings. Washing and offering of lamb. In Leviticus chapter 13, we see 7 washings, 7 days being put away and examined in the 8th day. Could we apply this to the 6,000 years of probation for man? And in the 7,000 years, those of the righteous seed being pronounced clean in the 8th day, 8,000 year. Amen. You know, these last 2 or 3 Torah portions has been centered on the 8th day, bringing out this idea of the 8th day. 7 days outside of the camp, and then the priest would examine him, and they would do the washings and things, and then he could come in on that 8th day if he was clean. Romans 6:3 says, "Know you not that so many of us, as were baptized into Yeshua the Messiah, were baptized into his death? Therefore we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as the Messiah was raised up from the dead by the majesty of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. For if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection. Knowing this, that our old man is impaled with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. For he that is dead is freed from sin." You know, that's why that there is the resurrection, to be coming back as a glorified body, putting on immortality, everlasting life. Going on in Romans 6, it says, "For he that is dead is freed from sin. Now if we be dead with Messiah, we believe that we shall also live with him. Knowing that the Messiah being raised from the dead dies no more, death hath no more dominion over him. For in that he died unto sin once, but in that he lives unto Elohim. Likewise reckon you also yourselves to be dead, indeed unto sin, but alive unto Elohim through Yeshua the Messiah, our Master. Let not sin therefore reign in your mortal bodies, that you should obey it in the lust thereof. Neither yield ye your members as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin, but yield yourselves unto Elohim as those that are alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness unto Elohim." So, we should count each day a blessing, right? If we live in righteousness. It says, yield yourselves unto Elohim as those that are alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness unto Elohim. And going on in Romans 6, says, "For sin shall not have dominion over you, for ye are not under the law, but under grace." What? What then? Shall we sin because we are not under the law, but under grace? May that never be so, he says. "Know you not that to whom you yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants you are to whom you obey, whether of sin unto death, or of obedience unto righteousness? But Elohim be thanked that ye were the servants of sin, but you have obeyed from the heart." Oh, we got to obey from the heart? I can't just say a couple of things and I'll be okay. on about my business? Obeyed from the heart that form of teaching which was delivered you. Being then made free from sin, you become the servants of righteousness. For when you were the servants of sin, you were free from righteousness. Those two things can't go together. They don't go together, do they? It's kind of an oxymoron. When you were the servants of sin, you were free from righteousness. When you're the servants of righteousness, you're free from the law because you're obeying the law, right? Righteousness should dwell within. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of Elohim is everlasting life through Yeshua the Messiah, our Master. Wages of sin is death. So, one thing we have to establish then, what is sin? The biblical definition is a transgression of the law. Sin is a transgression of the law. So, when we fully understand what Paul is saying here, it's really powerful. It says, whoever you put your servant to, he becomes your master, whether it be unto sin and death, unto Yeshua and life everlasting. This is 1 John 5. Whosoever believeth that Yeshua is the Messiah is born of Elohim, and everyone that loves him that begot loves him also that is begotten of him. By this we know that we love the children of Elohim, when we love Elohim and keep his commandments. For this is the law, this is the love of Elohim, that we keep his commandments, for his commandments are not grievous. For whatsoever is born of Elohim overcomes the world, and this is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith. Who is he that overcomes the world, but he that believeth that Yeshua is the Son of Elohim? So you have to have the faith, act upon that faith, live that faith. Then you can truly be called the Son of Elohim, the sons of God. This is he that came by water and blood, even Yeshua the Messiah, not by water only, but by water and blood. And it is the Spirit that bears witness, because the Spirit is truth. Philippians 2:14 says, do all things without murmuring and disputings. Wow. So we need all the kids to read this one, right? This is for just the kids, right? I think all of us, right? Said he always wants a willing servant, to be willing to do what the master asked without murmuring and disputing and say, oh man, you sure this is really what you want? You know, it's kind of human nature, but because what did Moses, when he called him, he kept saying, no, I can't do that. I can't this, I can't that. I can't talk, I can't do this, I can't go down there, they'll kill me, and on and on and on. So that you may be blameless and harmless, the son of Jehovah, without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Are we shining as lights in this corrupt world that we live in? A crooked and perverse nation? Do you watch the news and you just scream? Makes you want to scream? No, it really makes me sad, really, when I watch the things that are going on. how that we of a nation have fallen so far from God. Holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of the Messiah, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. Holding forth the word of life. It says, choose life. Choose life. Choose following me, if you will do my commandments, statutes, and judgments. I will be your God, and you will be my people. Yea, and if I be offered upon the sacrifice and service of your faith, I joy and rejoice with you all. Those are mighty words that were actually heard from a lot of martyrs that stood in defiance of evil and that were burned at the stake and stoned and chopped up and whatever horrible death that they could be imagined upon them. Yet they stood and didn't renounce their faith. Reading on in 10 says that at the name of Yeshua every knee should bow, of things in heaven, things in earth, and things under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Yeshua the Messiah is sovereign, to the praise of Yahweh the Father. Wherefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is Elohim which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. You mean that this church is not going to get us there? You mean that your dad or your mother or your wife or your sister or whatever? Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Prepare your heart. Let it be a part of your life. Own your faith. Not just the faith of your parents or whatever. Own your faith. And in closing, I want to read in Mark 1:40. It says, and there came a leper to him, Yeshua, beseeching him and kneeling down to him and saying unto him, if thou wilt, thou can make me clean. And Yeshua, moved with compassion, put forth his hand and touched him, and said unto him, I will, be thou clean. And as soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy departed from him, and he was cleansed. And they straightly charged him, and forthwith sent him away, and said unto him, see thou say nothing to any man, but go thy way, show yourself to the priest, and offer for thy cleansing those things which Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. Pretty powerful, isn't it? Here is the creator of this world with compassion, healing him of leprosy, but then told him, go see the priest, because the laws contained in Moses demanded, and to be a testimony unto them, because the natural question would be, how did you get healed? What happened? Well, this man that I know, I think y'all call him Yeshua, he healed me. Hadn't been done before, had it? So here's the big question. It says, have we gone to Yeshua, our high priest, for the cleansing of our leprosy? So only he can cleanse us of that leprosy. through our opening our heart to Him to come in. May your Shabbat be filled with shalom. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Thank you for watching a teaching from a Metzora. If you are ever in the Odessa area, we would love to welcome you to our Shabbat service, 11 a.m. every Sabbath. For more information or for more teachings, feel free to find us on the web, www.methatorahodessa.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook. Thank you. God bless you and your family. Shalom.